Okay, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mary, and thanks everyone for being here. My name is James, and I'm an alcoholic and most certainly an addict. And I'm tired. I've been up since 6:30 in the morning, and I cycled today, and I tanned for the first time in 10 months. So forgive my brain because it's going to be not succinct. But anyway, I made bullet points. So let's go through them together. Um, okay, so I suppose it all starts with being a child. I am a only child, um, and the child of two drug addicts, specifically heroin and cocaine. I'm born and raised in New York City as well, if that's pertinent. As far as my parents are concerned, unfortunately, my mother continued to be a heroin addict, made attempts to get clean, and eventually relapsed and died, overdosed at the age of 34, I think. 34, 35. I think it's 34. My father, a little bit before that, decided to get clean on his own accord and successfully did it without any help. I think it was just a mental shift in him. And I've always found it very interesting that dichotomy exists, that one person made it and one person didn't. And just to think that that's in me somewhere, especially since my father just did it. Uh, and so in the last few months, I was trying to find a therapist, and I found one that I didn't love, but she asked me what my memories were of my mother. And in sort of therapy fashion, it's such a simple question, and yet it felt like I had never really been asked that. And the things that I thought right away were surprising to me. And what was most surprising was that unfortunately they were all negative, and not because she wasn't a good person, she was a great person. I had and have great parents, and that is something I'm very grateful for. But unfortunately, my memories of my mother were mostly being in the apartment when she was using drugs, sometimes with other people. There was a time where I woke up and she had just been beaten and raped, and she was on the couch. There was many times where I'd find her asleep with a needle in her arm and that sort of thing. And at that time, I was living with her, but my father, they got divorced, and he had left to the west side of Manhattan. And I was still living with her, and there were people over shooting up, and one of them went to go take a nap in my bed, and eventually I was sent to go wake up this person, and they were dead. They had overdosed. And so that happened, and the police were called, and that's eventually what got me pulled out of that apartment with my mom, and I went to go live with my dad. A few years after that, living with him, eventually she wasn't returning phone calls, and so he went over and found her when she had overdosed. And that is something I feel a lot of sympathy for my father, having found her and having to deal with that. I can't even imagine, and I've never really asked him about it. So that sort of is the beginning of my childhood as far as those things are concerned. And then as a teenager in high school, I was already the version of myself I am now, which is highly cynical and highly judgmental about society and humans, and being a self-proclaimed misanthrope and all of those buzzwords that are so fun to use when you're just frustrated. And so I didn't like school very much. I thought it was pointless, which I regret. I should have gotten a proper education. I probably would have been a lot smarter. But I got left back in the 10th grade. And during that time, I sort of made friends with the cool kids, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, they were all very educated and interesting people. It's not like they were sort of boring cool kids, but they were drug users and drinkers. And so that was sort of my introduction to those things. Basically, I'm 14 years old or 15 or whatever it is, being left back, and I'm being handed a 40 and a blunt. And not too long after that, the first thing I ever got addicted to was Adderall, buying it from other people and taking massive amounts of it. what a surreal drug to be addicted to. But so that sort of began that. And with that came also a very strong interest in sex, and pursuing that sort of thing. And that all sort of compounded into who I would become for most of my life, which was just someone who was chasing drinking, drugs, and sex. Eventually, I got left back from the 10th grade again because I never went. And I just told my father, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just not going to go to school. It just doesn't work for me. And my father was very understanding because my father's very cool. And he just knew there was no point. So I dropped out, and not through my father, but through the suggestion of a friend, I ended up getting a job at a rental house for camera equipment, which then subsequently led me into joining the union and becoming a camera assistant in the film industry. So that was also sort of part of my life, about being 15 or 16 and being thrown into a career that I actually didn't even really understand what it was. I was sort of this privileged, spoiled kid being handed this thing and just didn't think twice about it. But luckily for me, I did have work ethic. I was interested in working and proving myself and not being handed everything, although I was handed this job. And, through that, I don't think I was using that much. I probably was drinking beers after work and things like that. But eventually, when I was 19 or 20, I was already getting frustrated with how much the job was consuming me and just general cynicism for life. And eventually started working with someone who really taught me how to drink after work, which was something, when I first did it, I remember having like 3 beers and not being able to keep my head up and thinking, oh, well, I have to stay cool for this other person and I can't even do it. So I sort of powered through it and eventually became a successful bar drinker. And so, yeah, I guess that sort of leads into when my drinking and using really went hardcore, which was basically the entirety of my 20s. In my early 20s, I started doing things like buying liters of Jameson. Jameson was my drink, and drinking at home, and really starting to enter the bar scene and falling in love with it because it also equaled promiscuity. And so that sort of became my main objective, was to go to the bar, get insanely drunk, do lots of cocaine, and try to find a stranger to take home and fuck them. And I did that a lot, and I deeply regret it. It really fucked me up, especially as far as intimacy. Just the other day, one of the topics in the meeting was sex after getting sober. And I really have kind of fucked my mind up when it comes to stuff like that. I feel like I could go off of a tangent on that for a while, so I'll skip over that and maybe circle back to it. I guess I think it's also important about my mental state and why I think it motivates me to drink and use drugs. I've never been diagnosed with any big words, but I certainly think that sometimes I might be a candidate for them. I am an obsessional thinker. That's driven by a lot of anxiety and a lot of catastrophizing. And I would say my biggest weakness is regret. To this day, I still suffer from having lots of intrusive thoughts that will loop in my head for days, weeks, or months, or even years, no matter how big or small. It makes me feel genuinely insane. And so I have a very loud mind. And I also don't like myself. I don't like my history. I don't like the choices I've made. And I certainly wish I could do it differently. And I can't. And that was a big source of my drinking, just sort of digging a hole deeper and deeper. In my mid-20s, though, I eventually met a woman named Marin, who would sort of change everything about my thinking and also everything about what I look for intimately in a partner. Um, and when we met, I could almost tell that it was too early, that I wasn't mature enough for it. She was actually 4 years younger than me, but I just knew I wasn't ready for it because I think I was primarily driven to chase dopamine in the form of going to the bar, getting drunk, and fucking strangers. And at the time, I really had no idea that I was a sex addict, but I was. I remember my friend sort of scolding me once about that I didn't care about who I brought into my bed and how I was destroying my mind by doing that. And retrospectively, he was very right. Anyway, I met this person and I fell in love with her. She was everything I had not thought I wanted. She was basically an androgynous hippie who was an aspiring actor, an amazing painter, and a successful actor now. And she was just so level-headed and so well-educated and all of the things. And of course, I just continued to drink and use and be angry and start fights and not pay her any attention and cheat on her and all of these things and totally destroyed it. And eventually she broke up with me. And at the time, I thought I was free, and it only took about 6 months until I realized that she was free and that I was going to be living with this regret indefinitely for the rest of my life. And so that led into a desire to get sober for the first time. I basically was drinking over that breakup and drinking so heavily. And at that time, I was close to about a 750 milliliter drinker almost a day, and hiding it in hampers and all of that stuff. And so in 2016, I think March or April, I realized that I didn't want to drink anymore. And then I quickly realized I couldn't really stop, which was sort of my first taste at so-called step one. And I basically entered this deep depression where I wanted to kill myself, essentially. And I mean, going past passive suicidal ideation into close to active, not buying any materials or anything, but the desire was very strong. It was almost like a mushroom trip. It was so surreal. The world was literally visually gray. Everything was muted. It was almost a caricature of itself. Anyway, as I was dealing with that emotion, I had it in my head to reach out to somebody, because I felt like I had to do that before going any farther. And so I did. I reached out to two people who were close friends at the time, and not really anymore these days, because that's what happens when you get older. But anyway, I saw them both and explained myself. And one of them eventually said something that made me laugh. I don't remember what it was, but in that moment, just laughing sort of snapped me out of my mindset. And I decided I wanted to live. And I took a look in the mirror and I was a balloon. I was close to being fully yellow. And I knew that if I wanted to live, I was going to have to stop drinking or my organs were going to fail. I could feel my kidneys pulsating. It was pretty gross. I'm sure if I got blood work and all of that, it would not have been good results. So I got sober the first time. I hit the pink cloud really fucking hard. I just wanted to, I realized that, health had a lot to do in making a good case for myself. And so I discovered the bicycle, I discovered healthy eating, and kind of rode with that first time. It took me 2 weeks to detox in my bed. I'm pretty sure I had seizures, although I can't say for sure. And I sweated. I don't know, sweated is a word. I sweated in my bed so profusely that I had to throw my bed out. It was like a cartoon, like the shape of my body, yellow, was in the bed. And throwing that out was embarrassing and difficult to do at an hour where no one would see it. And also that reminds me of the other thing. When I first got sober, I had about 300 1-liter bottles in my apartment, all in my closets and under my bed. And I had to throw those out periodically so that not to cause suspicion. And then I remember getting down to the last 50 bottles and so excited to get rid of them that I triple bagged them and waited till 3 a.m. and ran them down the street and dumped them in front of someone else's apartment because I just wanted to get rid of them. And it was so freeing. And I actually did main speaker my first time completely unprepared at 87 days, where like everyone was a no-show. And I remember bringing that up and having no sense of community. And then at the end, people raising their hands and going, oh, when you talked about the bottles, when you talked about the bottles. And all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, I'm not alone in these weird, intricacies of drinking. Sorry, one second. So anyway, I lasted about 8 months. I thought I had it all figured out. The pink cloud was super strong. I also rubbed it in everyone's face. Hey, guess what? The secret to happiness is not drinking. I didn't know if you knew that, but I found the secret. And then after 8 months, I was going to visit my grandmother, who I hadn't really talked to in 5 years, so I was so busy being a drunk. I booked a ticket to surprise her for her birthday, and I think a few weeks later she died, and that really bummed me out. And I went down there instead of to visit her. I went down there for her, not her funeral, but like her wake or whatever the other thing is. And I remember I was so exhausted and so fed up with not getting all the things I thought I deserved, especially my ex-girlfriend coming running back into my arms, which obviously didn't happen. There were a plate of sugar cookies at that wake, and I ate them all. I think it was about 4,000 calories. And it wasn't too long after feeding that I asked my uncle, who was in this room, I think, if he had drugs on him. And he did. He had Valium. And I took the Valium. And a few minutes later, I asked him to drive me to a bar, which was Dan Marino's sports bar in Florida. And I ended up having 2 rounds, 2 Guinnesses and 2 double Jamesons. The sunset was beautiful. The blackout was not. The blackout was horrendous, and I don't really even remember it. I woke up on the plane. I don't even know how I got there, and ended up drinking for a whole other year. I went back to doing cocaine. I went back to fucking strangers. It happened rapidly. I know I'm taking up too much time, I think, so I'll speed it up. After that 1 year, towards New Year's, as a lot of us do, I think, I realized I had to get sober again. I weaned off that time because I remember seeing my doctor. He said, if you ever detox like that again, you're going to die. And it really freaked me out. Sometimes I wonder if my intestinal problems are because I detoxed incorrectly. I think sometimes. So the second time I got sober, I took it a lot more seriously, and I was really humbled this time around, and I knew to just be very precious with it and careful and not get too ahead of myself. And I ended up getting some good jobs. I was getting good work. I was saving lots of money, and I ended up being sober for 2.5 years, and they were good sobriety. I started cycling a lot and taking it more seriously, which cycling is a direct result of my sobriety. It's something I think is worth noting. I would not have found it if I had not gotten sober, and cycling has changed my life mentally and physically. And I mean, beyond cycling, it's given me an interest in urban planning. It's given me an interest in socioeconomic division and inequality in America. It has just opened my eyes to everything. And it's amazing how one result of being sober and wanting to grow turns into one hobby, turns into how I see everybody. I mean, the most drastic change, and it sounds really cheesy to say out loud, but I was not an empathetic person at all. All I cared about was my pleasure. And it's not like I wanted to cause other people pain. I was just so focused on my own pleasure that I could not pay attention to anyone's pain. And so, you know, through the year, since the very first time I got sober to now, I've collectively have been sober 5 years and drank for 2 years collectively. So there has been growth in all of that time, even though I forgot to mention I'll have 6 months Saturday, just for context. Yes, thank you. I do appreciate that. So during that 2.5 years, I realized I was really unhappy with my job. Um, it's all I knew. It's 18-hour days. It's working in the rain. It's a lot of good money, but that's it. You're selling your time and your body. And my body was falling apart and I was doing nothing with my life. And I realized that I was like, what are the two things missing in my life? And it very simply was, I'm not creative and I'm not passionate about anything. And I'm getting older. I turned 37 yesterday. And so, you know, my 40s are coming up and whatever that means. And I know that's still young. I know that's still young, but still it's a number that means something. You know, and so I'm working this job and I'm going, okay, just work until you're dead and save every dollar you can save and then escape. And so COVID happened and I had about 4 years worth of money in my savings account. And during that 2.5 years, I was starting to develop intestinal pain that was questionable. It was becoming very difficult to wake up in the morning and sort of address what was going on with me, knowing that I had to go to work and just choosing to ignore it or sort of power through it, but being in pain all day and not really knowing what it meant. So sorry to just jump back a little bit. The year before COVID, I realized I had to start taking it more seriously because I would wake up 3 hours before work, and this is too much information, but fuck it, this is my time. There was a period of time where I was defecating 20 times a day for about 2 years. That was happening with me, and that's a horrifying existence. I hope no one ever has to experience it. It's tough. But so what I would do is I'd wake up 3 hours before work and I would drink coffee and try to defecate as many times as I could before going to work so that my stomach would be as empty as I could empty it. And I would take the train, I'd get off the train and I would stop and sit on a stoop and cry because I didn't understand why my intestines were hurting so much. And then I'd go to work with a big smile on my face and pretend nothing was happening. And eventually oh man, I'm taking so much time. Eventually, I was like, okay, I need to start seeing doctors. And so I scheduled an endoscopy and I was either going to be able to get the endoscopy the next day or wait 4 weeks. And my boss would not let me take the day off. And that was when I became rebellious against the system. That's when I realized that nobody gives a shit about, you know, I'm in a union. I'm a part of a brotherhood. I'm almost 20 years on the job, and I'm dying, and I want to go find out why. And they could care less. So that was going on with me. COVID happened. The summer of COVID, I had 2.5 years. I was at a breaking point. My body is failing. It's hurting all the time. It's taking away my social life, my intimacy life. I mean, I was basically just home ridden. And so with 2.5 years, I basically snapped and had a panic attack and drank again. And it was just a beer. And then 2 days later, it was a liter of Jameson. And that continued on for a few months. And then I sort of just, these last 3 years have kind of bounced in and out. Like I'm sober 6 months, I'm sober 9 months. And I'll speed up to the end. I totally didn't go by my notes, but basically this last November, I went down to Texas with my father to visit his sister, and was freaking out both about how my body's failing and my savings account is running out, and oh my God, my dad's getting older and he's going to die someday, and all of these kinds of thoughts. I ended up drinking a bottle of wine in the fridge and relapsed and flew back to New York and drank for a month, and then found this group on the internet. So let me quickly go to my in closing section because I totally went off of my little script here. You know, to summarize, that I've spent the last 6 months talking about my intestinal pain to this group every time I share. And it's becoming a bit of a wax on, wax off moment for me because I'm exhausted by it. I really appreciate the space that I've been given to talk about this same topic over and over again as I stay stuck in it. But in a way, in the end, I sort of realized, you know, the wax on, wax off moment is hearing myself say it over and over again and growing tired of it. and thinking, is this going to be the rest of my life? Am I just going to be complaining about this problem? Even though the problem is totally justifiable to be upset about, you can only complain about it so much before you realize that's all you're doing is complaining and not doing anything. So I'm very thankful for this group to let me work that out loud. My friends certainly couldn't handle it, and why should they? It's not easy being around a sick person. What am I working on now? Regaining my health. The last 6 months, or the last 9 months, I was in a very heavy depression. I wasn't leaving the house at all. I wasn't making any effort. I was eating poorly and all of these things, and was really kind of rotting away and not taking any action. Luckily, in the last 3 weeks, I somehow had a moment where I caught myself being above it for a second, and I realized I had to seize it or it was just going to go away. I got back on the bicycle. I did some laps. It hurt. It still hurts now, but it's me trying to take action and trying to fight for the little moments that I can actually leave the house and not be in pain, which are few and far between. And basically adjusting and accepting a new life that is not the one I want. There is a life I want, and I can't really have it. And I have to sort of accept what my limitations are. I'm at a place now where it's not what's been taken from me, but what can I still do? What am I still capable of doing? Okay, I can only leave the house twice a week for 3 hours at a time. Okay, then that's what it is. Then that's what I have. I spent a long time sulking about that and not doing anything, and it was getting me nowhere, but more depressed. So right now, thankfully, I'm on an upswing. I'm in a moment of action. And yet again, that's thanks to this group and also being a sober person. And yeah, and that's it. And I also sort of wrote, what am I still struggling with? Part of it is letting my current situation win and being upset that I'm a sick person that is always in physical pain. And also my addiction to the internet, which I'm throwing in there for someone because it's real. It's a real thing. I'm really addicted to Reddit. At the end of the year, Reddit tells you how many bananas you've swiped through or whatever. Mine was 1 million. 1 million bananas. That's disgusting. That's crazy. So I still have problems. I still have lots of mental problems. I'm still an obsessional thinker. But hopefully I'm ending on a positive note that, in sobriety, I've definitely been given plenty of opportunity to grow and become a more empathetic person, someone who is more in touch with my body. And when given opportunities to take action, even doing this, like, I don't want this to be a big deal. Who cares about my story, whatever. I'm happy to tell it. But I'm also trying to go, memorize this moment that I'm telling my story, that I'm sober and able to tell my story with all of these people and all of my new friends in these boxes. This is a good memory. And I'm just trying to enjoy the positivity while I have it, because like any depressed person, I could wake up tomorrow and for no fucking reason at all, I'm sad again. And I could be sad again for 9 months. And it sucks to watch your life go by through a window. So thank you to the group, as you say, because I really am grateful. And yeah, I'm thankful for my sobriety. I really am. And I could not do it without the people in this room. I took a lot of time, and I'm very thankful for you giving it to me. I'm going to shut up now. Thanks.